Welcome to the Expert Series, where we explore the cutting edge issues shaping national security and defense. It's Tuesday, August 20th, 2024, and I'm Josh Malm, Director of Research and Analysis for the CDA Institute. Today, we're focusing on a topic that's rapidly transforming military operations around the world: artificial intelligence. As AI continues to evolve, it's becoming a crucial component of modern military strategy, enhancing everything from drones and robotics to cyber operations. These advancements not only improve the efficiency and capabilities of our forces, but also bring about significant cost advantages. However, the implementation of AI is not without its challenges. We will be discussing the importance of human-machine teaming, the need for a platform-centric military, and the ethical concerns such as bias in AI models that must be carefully managed. We'll also explore the necessity of developing interoperable AI systems with our allies, ensuring that Canada remains a key player on the global stage. Another critical aspect we'll touch on is the role of startups in the broader tech ecosystem in Canada. Building a stronger startup culture is essential to streamlining procurement and enhancing military technology, and making sure Canada remains globally competitive. To help us unpack these complex issues, my colleague Heather Lee, a CDAI research assistant, will be joined by Daniel Araya. Dr. Daniel Araya is a senior partner with the World Legal Summit and senior fellow with CG. His work focuses on artificial intelligence and public policy, and their impact on a changing global order. Dr. Araya is a regular contributor to various media outlets and policy organizations, and his most recent books include Augmented Education in the Global Age, Augmented Intelligence, Smart Systems in the Future of Work and Learning, and Smart Cities as Democratic Ecologies. He has a doctorate from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. Daniel will provide insights into the current state of AI in the Canadian Armed Forces, the challenges we face, and the strategic planning needed for the future. This is the Expert Series.
Well, thank you so much, Daniel, for joining us today. And today we're going to be talking about the CAF and Canadian Armed Forces and their AI implementation. So my first question is more of a context setter. So when many of us picture AI, we think of futuristic robots or ChatGPT. What does AI look like in practice for the CAF? And what do we mean when we say the CAF will pursue AI integration?
Right. So, well, thanks for having me, first of all. So I want to answer that question in two different ways. One is to sort of define what we mean by AI as a general purpose technology. And two, then to get into some kind of, basic examples of how it's being deployed, not just by the Canadian military, but by militaries around the world. So firstly, I think it's a bit of a misnomer to say that AI is literally artificial intelligence. What it is machine learning. And it's machine learning that leverages data and algorithms and, massive computing capabilities to mimic human cognition. So, first and foremost, AI is software. And so in that sense, it's software that's been designed to, as closely as possible, align itself with human reasoning. And in that way, give us human beings the capacity to scale up our own reasoning capabilities. And so it's very early days in terms of where AI is at. I mean, this argument that we know where AI is going, I think is not accurate. We don't fundamentally understand where this is taking us. We have some, frames of reference in history, the steam engine, the printing press, the internal combustion engine, electricity. All of these general purpose technologies have had massive transformational impact on industrial society. And AI is one of these. And so it's not only going to be deployed in the military, it's going to be part of telecommunications. It's going to be part of transportation. It's going to be part of logistics. It's going to be part of healthcare, education. Literally every institution that uses information, data, and intelligence in some form will be leveraging AI. So that's the first sort of, basic framing for understanding what we're talking about here. Now, to build on that in terms of military application, the most obvious examples are drones. So drones have been a key feature of the Ukraine war, for example. And drones run the gamut from, U.S. military has been deploying drones for decades. The kind of drones we're generally speaking about now as being sort of the tipping point are battery-powered, very low-cost drones, particularly the Chinese DJI drones. Those drones have had an outsized impact on warfighting because they're so very cheap and because they're, relatively silent. And, in that sense, they provide a kind of asymmetrical advantage by comparison with, say, the, Joint Strike Fighter, which costs, $1 million. I mean, the difference in terms of what you can do on a cost basis are significant. And so there's a certain cost advantage or economic advantage to using AI-powered technologies like drones. The next generation is robotics. And so we talk about drones that are air-based, sea-based, and land-based. And all of these drones are basically just early generation robotics. And these kinds of tools are going to be significantly impactful in terms of augmenting mass and making it possible for the military to deploy at scale with potentially having very limited impact or vulnerability to personnel. This is a working debate. I know many people in the military are dubious about the potential of drones and robotics in terms of their accuracy, in terms of leveraging AI in an effective way. But I would just say that these are very early days. This is a nascent technology. It will improve over time. And so I think it's important to work with the technology within limits, obviously. So to build on that, there's other applications of AI around cyber operations, defensive and offensive, information processing and recommendation systems. Say, for example, pattern recognition around satellite imagery is very common now, logistics, and then maintenance of vehicles and resources, particularly predictive maintenance. So knowing when something might break before it happens. All of these involve cost reductions, and they're valuable because they also reduce the need for personnel. So you can put that personnel elsewhere. I think the one thread that runs through particularly the CAF is an argument around, or I guess a strategy around human machine teaming. So leveraging AI for augmenting soldiers on the ground or airmen or people in subs or at sea. The one caveat I would say that is critical that I want to get into later, but not to jump the gun, is around cloud computing or a platform-centric military and software-centric systems. The point is that it's very difficult to attach AI to already structured military operations and get the most effective bang for your buck. More likely what will happen over time is software will become the centerpiece upon which the whole architecture of military operations are built. And I think transitioning from the kind of vertically integrated military systems or bureaucratic military systems we have today to a much more agile, networked and distributed military is, a huge challenge, something that large multinationals have had to deal with over the past decade or more. And it's not a simple challenge. It's something that, the CAF is. There's a recent document they put out on AI strategy, and if you read through that document, you can see that they put some time into trying to grasp how to go about transforming the operations of the military and the practices of the military, both at the bureaucratic level and in the field. And I think they get their head around it. I think that's smart. So it's a smart beginning discussion that I think hopefully will mature.
So now that we kind of have an idea as to what military AI and what AI is generally, Canada has obviously taken some steps to start this process. So in Strong, Secure, and Engage, the 2022 Defense Policy Update, Canada has said that they will try and integrate some new AI capabilities like remotely piloted drones, cyber technologies, and space-based surveillance assets. Where is the CAF currently with the implementation of these capabilities, and what progress is currently being made on that front?
I mean, there's a long way to go. I think, the CAF is strapped for resources, financial resources. There's a lot of issues around retention and bringing new people into the military. And so, the Canadian military is not in a good place at the moment. And I think that's sort of a base case for understanding what's coming next, which is around augmenting the military with more advanced data-driven or AI-driven technologies. There is a lot of discussion in the Canadian military around what to buy, where to procure from, what tools are going to be the most valuable. And the thing that comes up first, obviously, is drones. So drones is a given. There's already a process in place to procure drones. And, I can't speak to how far along that is. I can see already from my experience, with even just in a few projects I've had with D&D, that they're experimenting with new drone technologies. But this technology is well established on the battlefield already, not just in Ukraine, but Azerbaijan, and which are a lot of Turkish drones in Ethiopia, in sort of small wars around the world. I suspect the one area where, the Canadian military could probably, so I should also say cyber operations are a big part of what they're trying to do, information processing, and again, human machine teaming. But I think the one area where I think are apprehensive and probably shouldn't be is in robotics. So that is to say, if you look at the U.S. military, which is obviously much larger, there's a lot of investment in trying to work with startups to leverage a next generation of robotics to supplement personnel and to make the military more data-driven fundamentally. And the Chinese have a word for this, which is awkward, which is an intelligentization. It's awkward to say, but it kind of speaks to the idea that you want smart robots, ultimately. You want those smart robots to back up the creative intuition of human beings in a, human machine teaming environment. And I think TCAP knows this, and I think that's the direction they want to go. But I can't speak to it more than that based on my own personal experience, but I think it's a given that that's the direction the military is going to go.
Thank you so much. And now I want to kind of turn to the challenges. Now we've talked about the benefits and what potential AI implementation would look like, but now there's obvious challenges that come with that. And one major problem, especially with AI implementation, is ethical, legal, and safety concerns. Could you elaborate a bit more on what these challenges are?
Yeah, I mean, this is not unique to the military. This is the nature of machine learning as it stands. So, machine learning or AI models are driven by data, and sometimes that data has bias built into it. It comes from human experience, and so humans are biased, and so that bias feeds through the data into the algorithms, into the AI models. And this isn't like this is in a sense a small feature when you look at AI or machine learning more generally as a technological innovation. Bias is a problem, but I don't think it's the scale of problem that sometimes the media makes it sound like. Having said that, it's a problem if you want to deploy them on the battlefield with soldiers. So it's something that has to be resolved, obviously. And the only caveat I would say is that the kind of AI we're talking about today, deep learning specifically, is only one technique or one method of AI, right? AI is a moving target. Very often what we call AI in one decade is no longer considered AI in the next. And so rather than looking at AI in terms of the machine learning we have on the ground or have in deployment now, we should be thinking in 10 or 20 year horizons and come to understand that AI is a fundamental part of what software is doing to systems and processes. And so the question about, say, for example, how to govern or manage AI is a big one. It's not one that I think can be answered easily. And I say that because I don't think AI is a singular thing, and I don't think it's a static thing. It's AI is a process, and it's a moving process. So I think we need guardrails. Obviously, we need to guide the process. It's just like if you're raising a child, you need to train that child or discipline that child so that it's coherent with the social norms in which it operates or engages in the world. And so I think AI is similar to that. AI will mature, and as it matures, it's going to be a much more robust and sophisticated technology than what we've seen so far. And so I think it's important to bear that in mind as we move forward down the road or down the track of governance.
Just as a bit of a follow-up question to that, could you crystallize some of perhaps the exact harms that would occur if we had if we had AI trained on biased data deployed in the field, either through whatever form it might take? What would be some of the harms to Canadian military operations, soldiers, if there was that biased data set in there?
Well, obviously, I mean, let's talk about image recognition. I mean, if you are hunting a particular target and that target is a friendly, but looks like the image trained or similar in as far as the machine learning is concerned, similar to the image it was trained on, and then, kills someone it's not supposed to kill, or targets someone it's not supposed to target, or acts in a way that is dangerous to the mission, then obviously that's not some kind of technology you want to be in the field with. If it doesn't respond in ways that are predictable, if it doesn't provide advantage to soldiers on the ground, and why even have it there? And so that's obviously something that has to be dealt with, in practical terms. And I think that, this is a challenge for AI developers more so than it is for, say, example, the military. It's something that, and we'll probably speak about this in more questions, but innovation now is coming from the private sector. It's not coming by and large from government or the public sector. So particularly in this space. And so as the military begins to engage with tech firms, small and large, there has to be a mandate that these kinds of problems get worked through before they're deployed to ensure that no unnecessary harm is done. That's not to say that no harm will ever be done. Obviously, new technologies always have consequences. But if we talk about the general purpose technologies we've seen in the past, like the steam engine, the printing press, or electricity, we couldn't imagine a military being deployed without these technologies, right? So there's no way forward outside of using AI, or more specifically software and ultimately robotics, in order to make, in our case, the Canadian military more robust and capable. So it's an unavoidable challenge that's ahead of us. It's not something we can dismiss and retreat from.
You've noted that most of these challenges kind of stem from industry rather than from the CAF. But is there anything, and we'll get into more about how we can work together with industry to mitigate these risks, but is there anything the CAF itself can do rather than just relying on industry?
Well, I mean, sure. In the United States, for example, which has the largest military in the world, at least in dollar terms, they often procure from tech firms, particularly around the platform rollout, cloud computing. But there is room for a new generation of startups. And what I would like to see in Canada that mirrors what we've seen in the United States is a more greater effort placed on looking at the value of startups to augment the procurement process, both in terms of streamlining it, making it more efficient. The military procurement process is notoriously slow and inefficient. Part of the reason for that is because, conventional weapons, when we talk about tanks and bullets, were, hardware that could be purchased at scale. Whereas when we're talking about software and robotics, very often the cycles of development are so much faster that if the procurement process is not accelerated, then we don't get the best quality, right? The software we use and deploy in our military becomes redundant very quickly. And so if you look at startups like Palantir or Anduril or even SpaceX, these have become fundamental pieces of the U.S. military. We need the equivalent in Canada. And I think that they're there, but they haven't been provided the kind of financial oxygen to grow. And so I think it's important for the military to begin wrapping its head around how to incubate new tech companies and not just go to large providers in the way they might have done in a conventional era. So that's one thing the military can think about in a more targeted way, how to work more closely with startups.
Kind of building off of that, again, sort of one of the major challenges is that that the industry, again, can typically take the lead. You've mentioned that we can collaborate with startups. Canada, we could potentially do that, but Canada also has a less strong startup environment than I think perhaps Silicon Valley does, especially in San Francisco. So how could the CAF perhaps better work together with traditional industry, perhaps in the absence of this kind of startup environment, to take advantage of new AI developments?
Yeah, and that's a very good question, because it's not really the military's role in some respects. It's, the federal government, right? So the federal government should earmark resources to build out our startup ecosystem in order to be competitive. Like, we have challenges around productivity. We have challenges around economic growth. These, I think, are fundamentally rooted in a lack of investment in the tech sector. And I think the consequence of that is that we're now seeing is that Canada's falling behind its peers across the G7, but especially the United States. And that's a large, horizontal problem across institutions. It's not an academic problem. It's not a military problem. It's not a federal government problem by itself. It's a problem for a national system. And so I think we need to rethink how we strategically do technology as a nation, and begin to appreciate that we need to move away from sort of older neoliberal models in which, we focus on competition for its own sake, and begin to strategically think about how we can build up a tech ecosystem that's competitive and one that will facilitate both economic growth and national security.
So we previously kind of approached it as an opportunity for Canadian CAF advancement, but are there risks to Canadian security that we will face if we don't keep up with technological advancement? What will happen if our adversaries or allies potentially get more advanced in this space than we do?
Yeah, I mean, it's a fundamental question. I think, to be blunt, I think we're already there. I think the United States does not look to us in a serious way in military terms. And I don't think, we have been riding on the security umbrella, to mix metaphors, that the United States provides for us. And we're very fortunate in that respect. But it does sap our sovereignty and our self-confidence as a nation. And so I think what we need to do is, it's not just about reaching the 2% goal that's talked about in NATO. It's about using resources more wisely. It's about reducing bureaucracy. It's about minimizing the sluggishness in procurement. It's about taking our tech sector seriously, and about understanding on the strategic level where this is all going. So, one thing I might add to this is one big difference you find in government. So I've worked at the interface of both the tech sector and government. One big difference in terms of how innovation is done, or how growth is done, is the tech sector plans around what you might call S-curves, which is to say exponential changes that are delivered or emerge as a consequence of software evolution. Government has a very hard time understanding this concept, I found. Government operates in linear terms. They assume the future will be just more of the present. And I think the consequence of that is that they're constantly falling behind the curve of change. And, in some respects, if you're in, say, for example, a regulatory environment, that's sort of par for the course. You're always going to be chasing technology. But if you look at other nations, say in Scandinavia or even South Korea, which are small nations as well, they often do a better job at planning for innovation than we do. And I think, we can learn from other nations that are our peers, whether it's Australia, similar size, or the Brits, which are kind of our common parallel models, or more, dynamic examples like South Korea or Finland or Estonia. We need to get better at software, and we need to deploy that software across our bureaucracies in a way that makes our systems far less sluggish, more automated to a certain degree. In other words, we need fewer people waiting in line, fewer focus on like a fax machine government, so I put it, and a much more digital government that's smarter and self-organizing if possible.
Just as a kind of final wrap up to the questions of what the challenges of AI implementation are there any others that you might want to mention that any other challenges the CAF faces with implementing AI that we haven't really covered, or areas that the government can improve its application of this technology?
Yeah, there's a few different things I'd say. One, I would say we should get back to manufacturing, because these technologies need to be built, particularly in the realm of robotics, right? It's not all software. It's just this software, the brains of hardware. And, if you look at what China's done, following the German model, they have moved leaps and bounds using manufacturing, using what, Industry 4.0 and, smart manufacturing methodologies. We need to get back to that as a nation, I think. I might be speaking out of my domain on that, but I'd like to see that. The other thing is I'd like to see a little bit more creativity in strategic planning in the military. So if you look at DARPA, in the United States, they have some methodologies around Mosaic, which is their modular approach to understanding how to deploy autonomous systems and AI in warfighting. We need to understand that if you look at some examples of deploying AI in games like Go or chess, I think the pace of war is going to accelerate dramatically. Now, none of us want war when it's all said and done. What we'd like is a system of peace. But you have to be prepared as a nation. And I think appreciating that war will change, just as it's always changed with new general purpose technologies. And an example that always comes to mind, which I think is actually a misnomer, but this example of Polish cavalry attacking Nazi tanks in World War II. We don't want to be the cavalry of the 21st century. We want to be keeping up with technological change and deploying it intelligently. And that's really not just a dollar issue, right? That's about leveraging resources. And so, the Canadian government both at provincial and federal level, need to appreciate that tech is critical to our future, both economically and in terms of security, and put more active work in, I guess, bringing in the personnel or human resource or human capital knowledge into the institutions. And so relying, for example, I have a PhD, I appreciate the value of formal education, but in a technological era that's changing this quickly, the degrees are not as important as people think they are. And very often they're just status markers. And I think if we're working with software developers and they don't have the degrees or the pedigree, it doesn't matter. Let's just get to the solutions, particularly as we move into a new multipolar era in which the geopolitical environment keeps changing so quickly.
Finally, I just want to touch on one last way in which Canada can perhaps improve its AI implementation. One thing that got mentioned again in the AI DND CAF report that recently got released was that Canada needs to work together with its allies to develop an interoperable AI system, can rely on its allies, can learn from its allies. So how would you say that Canada can work together and learn from its allies and develop a truly interoperable AI system that is all three of the things that we want? It's both ethical, legal, and safe, as well as serving the needs that the Canadian military needs it to?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, that's not a question that is exclusive to Canada. That's a question across NATO. So that I would park under the category of cloud computing and the platform military. So what you want is an extensible platform that is sort of plug and play for various military, so that all the data streams can be integrated together and the systems can work as one whole. Obviously you need, interoperable training as well. It's not just a tech question, but the fact is that as we move into a software-centric military environment, then having our software be effectively interoperable with the United States, with our allies in Europe, is going to be, the basic minimum requirement to having a comprehensive security architecture. And so it's not smart. For example, the United States has run into this problem where you have various branches deploying or seeking to deploy their own platforms, right? And then trying to knit them together. I think it'd be wiser to work somewhat, as Musk often talks about, from the basic requirements first, and then build out from there. So that again is a strategic question for people above me, but I think it's something that has to be thought about in security terms. And I also would preface that, I don't mean to be dismissive, but the age of the people in government matters. And so if you're not familiar with software, if you don't understand how it works, and you don't feel literate in that space, you may not be the person that should be responsible for leading these teams. And I think there should be a certain bias, with regard to who you have managing and organizing decision-making. I think tech-savvy millennials, and Gen Z will be very valuable over time. So it's important that we make this generational shift, move beyond the old industrial conventional way of thinking about the military, move towards a much more software-centric, savvy, digital institution.
All right. That's all the questions that I have for you today. Before we conclude, is there any final thoughts that you want to share with our audience about AI implementation?
I would say, yeah, bear with the technology. I think it makes people nervous. They look at the Terminator movies and they think that's the future. I don't think that's the future. But obviously, because it's a nascent technology, we're going to have some challenges ahead of us in terms of managing and governing it. One example that comes to mind is when electricity was discovered, everyone thought we were going to have ray guns and that the military would be turned into like some giant, electricity fighting system, when really it was just communications that really benefited. And I think, AI is similar. I actually think it'll probably be more profound than electricity, but it's similar in the sense that we don't quite know how to leverage it yet. Don't put the cart before the horse. Let's experiment. Let's figure out how this works. Obviously with guardrails, with governance, with institutions that have knowledgeable personnel, and have some level of confidence again that we can get this done.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today, Daniel. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you for having me.
And that brings us to the end of today's episode. I hope you found our discussion on AI and the CAF as enlightening as I did. As we've learned, the integration of AI in military operations is not just about technology, it's about strategy, ethics, and collaboration, both at home and with our allies. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter and be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss an update. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to leave a review, send us an email at josh@cdainstitute.ca, or reach out to us on social media. Your feedback helps us bring you content that's relevant and engaging. For more in-depth analysis and updates on national security and defense, be sure to visit our website at www.cdainstitute.ca, where you can find articles, reports, and more. Thank you for listening, and a big thank you to our guest Daniel Araya for sharing his expertise with us today. Until next time.